I'm working right now on a podcast episode about Ayman Al-Zawahiri. He has come up in our conversation before, and you mentioned, for example, that Zawahiri was really the operational brains behind the Al-Qaeda network to the extent that that, exists, and that bin Laden was something of a puppet or a serviceable pliant billionaire to supply some of the resources for that organization. I would be interested to hear anything that you have to say to fill in on Zawahiri, his background, how he plays into this, and the process by which he radicalized bin Laden, or whatever it is that the theory is.
Sure. The FBI side of information gathering, where you get to see if you are there and if you have the clearance and you have all those tapes. The specific file operation for FBI that I said started in mid to late 1996, and it went all the way till after 9/11. This is when we talked about Chatla. And again, I had lightly mentioned the preparation and the semi diversion to Plan B during the Balkans conflict in mid-1990s. So this is when Ayman Zawahiri's name and Ayman Zawahiri's activities show up a lot within the FBI files, counterintelligence operations. And again, not as Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is never, ever, ever mentioned there as Mujahideen, and not even connected in most of these operations to bin Laden. It means just Ayman Zawahiri. And Ayman Zawahiri in Turkey, a lot. Okay? Ayman Zawahiri in Bulgaria, a lot, but working with the Turkish arm of NATO and with NATO. Ayman Zawahiri in Azerbaijan, and meetings within U.S. military attaché in Azerbaijan when Ayman Zawahiri is meeting with high-level U.S. and Turkish officials, both officials also with NATO titles, okay? So this is the Ayman Zawahiri we had all the way until 9/11, okay? In one of the meetings within the U.S. military attaché in Baku, Azerbaijan, is the meeting where, in addition to these high-level officials, you had two high-level Saudi officials. But those Saudi officials had jobs in the United States. One of them was in charge of the Saudi intelligence office in the United States. The other one was high-level embassy person, again, Saudi. So the meeting that took place, these people from United States, so the Saudis didn't go from Saudi Arabia there. They went from the United States in Baku, and there were some other meetings there too. And this is when, again, if you look at it, in 1997, 1998, several meetings took place in Baku. This is after the assassination attempt by Abdullah Chatlı against Aliyev. And as I said, a lot of trips and a lot of activities in Turkey, Ayman Zawahiri. I read, this is not part of the FBI, of his presence in Switzerland, which I didn't even know. So you have this guy traveling, not in Afghanistan or Egypt. He's in Turkey, Bulgaria, Azerbaijan, Switzerland. And bin Laden, and I have said this in the past 11 years since my case, and I said, we always dealt with bin Ladens, plural. There were several bin Laden family members, people with bin Laden last name, that worked directly with the Saudi embassy here in the United States. They directly worked with Fethullah Gülen, and they would go for an official opening of the mosque. You know, when you cut the bow with the scissors and the Turkish prime minister is there and they are clapping. Is this mosque open, financed supposedly by Saudis and Fethullah Gülen, but actually the order and everything, the direction of that financing came from the United States, NATO. So you see that a lot. Now, another interesting thing with Ayman Zawahiri during this period, and you will see a very, very brief mentioning of this, is his arrest by the Russians. And FSB arrested Ayman Zawahiri, and they put him in jail. They kept him there for 6 months. Now, Ayman Zawahiri supposedly was carrying several passports. However, according to all this documented evidence, various articles, he carried this laptop computer filled with information. Well, the information we're talking about here during this time would be U.S. NATO operations that Ayman Zawahiri was carrying it out for the United States, for NATO. A lot of people, they're going to say conspiracy theorists. No, it was not. They have gone as far as, because so much has been leaked with CIA, sure, sometimes we look the other way. It is a lie. It's absolutely false. It was not that so-called back then Al-Qaeda, as they refer to them today, Mujahideen Zawahiri. It wasn't that they were carrying out some operation that was convenient to us in Bulgaria, in Yugoslavia, and with the Chechens, and we look the other way. That is false. Their commanders were the United States and NATO. They took the order, they implemented it. We are not talking about parallel work. No, we are not. We are not talking about convenient alliances. No, we are talking about directly working and directly being answerable to certain faction of US government and NATO, a certain faction of NATO. If you were to go and say 90% of people who work for NATO, they're not involved in this. It's a special division within NATO that includes the Turkish division of NATO, Romania, believe me or not, today. Anyhow, so according to the stories, Ayman Zawahiri is in jail. FSB, okay, and this is mid-1996, 1997, they confiscate his laptop. He's there for 6 months, and the FSB and Russians are unable to get these Arabic and a lot of these documents translated because they have no capabilities or translator in the country, the entire Russia, okay, and supposedly this laptop was loaded. Because of that, they let him go. And that right there tells you that how much Russians must know and what happened after that. Did they tag Zawahiri with their own FSB agents saying, let him go and we'll tag him because we know who he's working for. He's working for the United States of America, for NATO, okay, as is obvious. And we rather him be out there and tag him than keep him in jail here because we want to find out more. Well, of course, you would think that the U.S. actors won't be dumb and say, why in the world did they release the Zawahiri? And the question becomes this cat and mouse games and how did it develop between the two? But I always mention and I tell people and I say, look, this is the Soviet Union that we spent trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars fighting that gigantic beast. You know, they could go to the, almost to the moon and have nuclear. That Soviet Union, FSB is during this time is the new KGB. They were the same actors that we talk about. They were incapable of even finding one translator in the entire country or their intelligence. But this is the official narrative from the United States, from the mainstream media, whether it's United Kingdom or the United States. But it would be very interesting to know how much they were able to tag and find out, because if what they are saying is correct and if that laptop was loaded, FSB had in their possession the manual and they knew who was Zawahiri's real bosses. And that would be US, NATO, Gladio, Plan B. And again, that tells you another clue in there, how much Russians know about this. And if they were tagging him, if they were aware of all this stuff, you would think they would use the opportunity and put out so much information, especially after 9/11, and say, you know what, United States, this is your real face. You're telling this to your public. But look, the final meeting you had right before 9/11, not the final, because things continued. In fact, I'm in touch with some high-level people who have retired from Pentagon. One of them was a whistleblower. But they're saying most likely Zawahiri's current position is in that region. You're looking at either Dagestan or Azerbaijan. He's not in Pakistan currently. And even if you were to go to Pakistan, it would be for a trip and it would be a safe trip for him. And as you know, we don't like to capture any of these people alive. We like the mystery to remain. Nobody has talked. None of these so-called Al-Qaedas ever talked. Or they are drugged to death, so they are zombies like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He comes there, and even if he talks, are you going to believe this guy who's been injected and waterboarded, and hypnotized or whatever, but we don't capture these guys alive, because imagine if these guys were to talk, or they were to show documents of what kind of work they did and who did they work for. And I'm still waiting to hear from people in Russia, people from Russia. I hope that we have retired FSBs who say, you know what, let's put it out there. Or we may have some of these Turkish generals and say, well, we have already told the Turkish people through all these articles and everything what's going on. Now maybe we need to send some of this information and try to get this information out in the United States. I don't know if besides CorberttReport, if they would have any other outlets, because even if they were to give all the documents to New York Times or Washington Post, wouldn't see the light of day.
Well, I understand that the story of them not being able to translate the documents on his laptop is complete BS. And I guess we can speculate that perhaps Russia is trying to use this information, keep it as leverage, track some of these people, and do that. But for the life of me, I don't understand Zawahiri's motivation in this. If he is directly, knowingly working expressly for the U.S. NATO Gladio operation, why would he be so? And I mean, if for people who don't know his background, supposedly he was radicalized by Saeed Qutb. He was imprisoned as part of the roundup after the assassination of Sadat. He was tortured there and founded Egyptian Islamic Jihad, and then eventually went to Afghanistan where he met bin Laden. So this is the background, supposedly, of this Islamic radical.
Supposedly is the best way to put it, James, because even if we were to take it apart, what you just said about Anwar Sadat's assassination, we don't have a straight story on Anwar Sadat's assassination. And currently, nobody is able to hear what, Hosni Mubarak has to say. Because if you look at Zawahiri, and with that kind of background, and you look at how many times he went to jail and how many times he was released, one of the first questions you would ask is, especially with countries like Egypt and Turkey, if you're really anti-government, if you really are what they're saying you are, you don't even make it to jail, man. You are taken out, you disappear. There are tens of thousands of people in Turkey who have disappeared. Same thing, there are thousands of people in Egypt, the real ones, who have disappeared, who have been assassinated, who have been shot to death. But this guy, he's been in and out, in and out. Even if you look at timeline, and a lot of them it's like conflicting timeline, he's been in and out. So that alone should tell you, why was he out then? Why was he taken care of? That kind of a dangerous man who was radicalized, who supposedly took part in Anwar Sadat's, assassination, while we had his basically VP there. You really got to look at that and see how much of it is just smoke, because it doesn't add up.